It used to be the case that all faith-based entertainment was heavy on the wholesome, light on the production, telling sappy stories with low budgets and unprofessional quality.
Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Dan.
How's it going?
It's going okay.
Boy, the Lord's really been showing me some good stuff lately.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you about it sometime.
That is not the case today, with major studios realizing that there is a market for well-made Christian-themed movies, and with Christian productions like Angel Studios rising to prominence, more and more well-made Christian stories are being produced. Which got me thinking, what movies have we never been able to tell that we could tell now on a commercial level? If I could have a meeting with a Hollywood producer, if I could propose an idea to Angel Studios, what movies do I want made that I think could actually be successful and have something to say? I've come up with 5 that should start production tomorrow. Number 1, The Kings of Israel. Let's start with some familiar source material, the Bible, but offer a story that's never been told before, at least not in this way. Rather than focus on one king in particular, say David or Solomon, I'd love to see a multi-generational saga of the rise and fall of men. If we look to the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, we see basically the same story play out over and over again. Eli is chosen to lead the people and shows promise as youth, but as he grows older, he loses control over his children, becomes distant from God, leading to the rise of Samuel. Samuel leads the people for many years with faith and diligence, but there eventually comes a time when the people reject him and seek a king, someone younger and more powerful, giving rise to Saul, a young, strapping man who is more handsome than anyone else. The people have incredible admiration and hope for him, but as time passes, he squanders his goodwill with jealousy and disobedience before God and dies rejected and in disgrace. But never fear, because just behind him is David, a young boy with unshakable faith. He takes down a giant and wins a war. He pleases God with his obedience and unites the kingdom of Israel. Finally, the people have someone to believe in, a savior to lead us. Until he takes a married woman into his home and has her husband killed, falling from grace and becoming replaced by his son. A man that was so wonderful in his own right, showing great humility before God that he was blessed with unimaginable wisdom. We've heard this story before, from rising to falling. He seemed to care more about God than the people than his own glory, building the first temple for God, being a light to follow, until he too fell from grace, worshiping false gods and having many foreign wives. You see what I'm getting at here? More than a story about any one king, or even Israel in particular, it's a sort of cautionary tale of power in general that depicts the cyclical and ultimately futile nature of human leadership. It's a story that speaks to the primal fear of all human beings, but particularly of men, of being replaced, of looking over your shoulder for the next best thing, of looking back on one's life with regret at what should have been. It's a story with action, inspiration, deep despair, but ultimately wisdom, that our trust is not in men, but in the true King of Heaven. Number 2, St. Augustine. How is it that arguably the most significant theologian in the history of the church has no major movie about it? Not only did he literally write the book on Catholic theology against numerous heresies, he himself was a deeply flawed man with a past, things that really endear audiences to a character. Here is a man who lived a reckless youth. By his own admission, he was a pretty terrible person. He stole from the market, was part of what was essentially a cult, and had a child out of wedlock. His mother, St. Monica, is a saint, basically because she put up with him for so many years and never lost faith. You want to talk about a story relevant to mothers of our world today? Make a movie where the mother is constantly worried about her son, the wayward child who rejects God, but gets to experience great joy when her prayers are answered in the end. Dream come true for so many. But this is not some sappy, happier ever after type of story. After you get through the first act about his conversion, Acts 2 and 3 still have plenty of room for his debilitating guilt that seemed unwilling to forgive himself, and the fights with heretics about topics that seem as relevant today as ever. What if the priest sins? Are his sacraments valid? Yes, Donatism is a heresy. If someone is a good person but not religious, can they get to heaven? No. Pelagianism is a heresy. How do we know these things? Because Augustine told us so. I'm picturing a backstory about his lover, the internal struggle of a man looking to his past, his rise to confidence and leadership, maybe some thoughtful debates about the meaning of life, and just a bit of those heartfelt moments with mom to give a slight sentimental touch. What's there not to like? Number 3, Catherine of Sienna. When most people think of the Catholic Church, they understandably think of an organization run by men excluding the voices of women. While this has definitely been true at times, the success of Cabrini shows that stories of powerful women working within the system can be told and that audiences want to hear them. And so imagine what you could do with a story set in a time where there were 3 popes warring against each other and there was a woman in between, offering spiritual direction and diplomatic advice. That's the story of Catherine of Siena, a medieval Italian nun who became the first theological woman doctor of the church. Just picture the image of blowhard cardinals and popes conniving for power in public and then returning in secret to get advice of a cloistered nun. Imagine kings and princes around the world receiving letters from this demure woman and being absolutely blasted for their behavior, humbled to return to God. In a world today where women are rightly seeking equality with men and due respect, this could be a story that reminds us that women do not need to play the games of men in order to be respected or influential. It's not by being aggressive or powerful that she commands their attention, nor is it through cheap sexuality and temptation. She led from her wit, faithfulness, and humility before God. Now, admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about this time period, but I have to think that there is enough here to make an intriguing story that is one part political thriller, one part inspirational heroine changing the people around her. Number 4, Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. I was going to go with Bartolomé de las Casas here, the Dominican missionary responsible for defending the Indians in the New World and instrumental in the development of universal human rights, a story I would like to see, but I think we've seen enough white savior movies. What about a story from the perspective of a Native American saint? Also, we don't need 2 Dominicans in a row now. Come on, who do you think I am? Kateri did not grow up with a privileged life. As an infant, her family was taken captive by a neighboring tribe and her mother was given to the chief. At age 4, her parents and brothers died of smallpox, a disease that disfigured her face and left her half blind. But something inside her was moved by the Christian faith. Despite the hatred her uncle had for it and the animosity between her tribe and the Jesuits, she decided that she wanted to be baptized, taking the name Kateri, after St. Catherine of Siena, of all people. From this point on, her life was in danger, not from the colonizers, but from her own people. She was treated as a slave and given no food to eat on Sundays, eventually running away in the night, traveling 200 miles on foot to live in a Christian Indian village. She spent most of her remaining life in primitive conditions, taking up penitential practices, but she found hope and solace in her faith and dedicated her short life to helping others, dying at the young age of 24. In a world filled with stories of teenage girls rebelling against their parents to chase a boy, greatly concerned with how they look, it's refreshing to hear a story of a teenage girl rebelling to live a life of chastity, prayer, and service, finding worth in herself beyond her looks. I think it taps into the adolescent theme of forging your own path and offers an inspirational story about finding true happiness. And finally, number 5, the Franciscan Friars that saved Poland and Hungary from complete annihilation. If you're looking for a medieval adventure, this has it all. Picture this. You're living in 13th century Europe, a time of great religious renewal and hope due to the missions of the Franciscans and Dominicans. Things are really turning around from the so-called Dark Ages, and the world is becoming more cosmopolitan. There is peace and hope spreading throughout the whole land, until word reaches you of an invading warring nation called the Mongols. They've already conquered much of Asia, devastating everything in their wake, and they're moving west into Europe. If they decide to attack, it's basically theirs. What is the church to do? How about send 2 little Franciscan friars to beg for peace? Riding their horses 3,000 miles in 106 days, Lawrence of Portugal and John Pien del Carpin nearly died multiple times along the way, fighting exhaustion, starvation, and the elements to reach the enemy in time. They weren't just fighting for their own lives, they were fighting for the lives of an entire nation. But even if they make it, who's to say they're gonna have any success at all? Can you imagine walking into this violent foreign nation once they got there? They could have been killed instantly without speaking a word. They might not have been able to communicate their message. Maybe they'd be held captive and tortured. In the end, none of this happened, and I think that this is where the movie really begins. The Mongolians rejected their pleas for peace, but allowed them to stay. They taught the friars their customs and shared their food. It seems like there was a real exchange of knowledge and maybe even understanding. So much so that when the friars returned home, they brought with them the secrets to victory. They taught their own soldiers all about the enemy, their tactics and weaknesses, and the European armies ended up fending off the Mongols and saving their nation. You're telling me you don't want to see that? We're talking underdog, fish out of water, travel adventure story with action sequences and tense moments mixed with discovery and awe at entering a foreign world. Maybe the friars are torn between the need to defend their people, rightly so, and a newfound love for their enemy. They're conflicted. We don't know if that actually happened, but hey, if movies are gonna take liberties with a story, they might as well take good ones. And we need good stories, original stories, inspiring stories. Enough with superheroes and remakes, enough with franchises that have every ounce of fun squeezed out of them, generically crafted to appeal to the most people, but ultimately offered nothing by way of story. Here are 5 stories that most have never heard of that are packed with possibilities. Please, Somebody make this happen.